And we are back broadcasting live on Party 93.4 in Hudson Valley, New York, and 94.9 also in Hudson Valley, New York, worldwide on party934.com. And as always, the video portion of this is broadcasting live on justin.tv/B Dave Walters. That was LL Cool J with Mama Said Knock You Out, which is just fantastic. If you can sit still during that song, check your pulse. You might be dead. Okay, now I'm going to let you in on a couple of secrets here that normally I wouldn't share. A lot of times people ask me how it is that I get the inspiration for this, how it is I can always come up with so much content for these shows. And quite frankly, it wasn't always easy filling up 20 different minutes a couple times a week, and now I have to fill up 2 hours a couple times a week. But that's all right, because I make it happen, because there's always a lot for us to talk about. But one of the ways I do that is, quite frankly, I say to you the things that I know I need to hear. Does that make sense? I work really hard to actually apply these things in my life because I'm really, really sensitive to hypocrisy. I think that's a terrible thing in this world. I mean, we all fall short of the glory of God, right? But nobody makes you say one thing and then do another thing. You'd be better off just to say nothing and then do another thing. So while I'm always out here putting out this high standard for people and calling out to people's greatness and saying that you're worth it and love yourself and don't do these self-destructive things and this, that, or the other, what would I look like if you found out that I'm an alcoholic cokehead who spends thousands of dollars at strip clubs? None of which are true, might I add. So I work really hard to actually live these things to the best of my ability. So the first question I have is for those of you that have heard this before or were with me when I put this video up live, which apparently was around the time of the Haiti earthquakes around a year or so ago, which is interesting. Think about that. I did this recording over a year ago. I don't know the exact date, maybe closer to 18 months ago. And the big thing in the news right then was the earthquakes in Haiti. What's the big thing in the news right now? Earthquakes in Japan, right? Who knows when you're listening to this recording? Maybe I'll be using this recording in a recording for some other, for television down the road or something. It's like those yo dog yo jokes. Like yo dog yo. I heard you like B Dave Walter, so I put some B Dave in your B Dave so you can listen to B Dave while you listen to B Dave. Sorry. But notice that there's patterns in life, right? There's patterns in what happens in the world. And I'm not going to get all biblical about, oh, it's the book of Revelations. It said there would be more earthquakes, although apparently I got to take a slight detour this direction. Because when we talk, you may have caught on to this now. I have an idea what I want to say, and I got notes, and I got an outliner and things. But when the Spirit moves me, when I get the nudge, the disturbance in the force, whatever you want to call it, to talk about something, I just talk about it because I've been doing this long enough that when I feel motivated to say something, I know somebody out there needs to hear it. Somebody out there needs to hear that exact thing, and they'll come back to me later and they'll say, "Oh wow, when you said that exact thing, like last week when we were talking about abuse and how a history or a background with some sexual abuse in it can manifest in some unusual ways." Can manifest as eating disorders, can manifest as illnesses. And I had a friend of mine say, you know, that happened to me. And I have those issues. And I'd never drawn the connection between the fact that there might be some correlation there. In fact, this person hadn't really read any of my articles. They've been a long time follower, but hadn't read a lot of the articles. And they went back perusing through the articles I've written on theexaminer.com. And they found the one that I wrote about body image and eating disorders and where I tied a past history of abuse to eating disorders. And this person was like, wow, that's interesting. I never heard that before. And then that night, out of all the questions I've answered, it's been a couple hundred questions. I went through some past questions, and that was the one that I chose to talk about last week. So this person took it as confirmation that that was significant. That was their sign from the universe. You follow me? That they pick an old article out of the blue at random, then I'd pick an old question out of the blue at random and bring that to them. And this person has since put things in motion to start talking to somebody about it, start getting some of this past baggage rectified. And so that's huge for me. So now, apparently, I need to say at least a little something about how people are saying these earthquakes and natural disasters are somehow tied to the Bible, sometime tied to the book of Revelations, that there'd be more earthquakes and wars in the end times, etc., etc. Here's the thing. People say things are getting worse, but we've only been paying attention to what's been happening in the world for about 100 years or so. 500 years ago, an earthquake could have happened in Japan, and not only would we not know about it, we'd never know about it until it takes 3 years, or it used to take 3 years to sail from Los Angeles or San Francisco Harbor over to China and back, right? So it would be years before somebody sailed over to Japan. And that's not even counting the fact that Japan's borders were closed for centuries and Westerners couldn't even come in. It would literally take years for somebody to sail over there, get there, realize the port wasn't there, and then come back, and then maybe a few people in San Francisco would know. The point I'm making, a lot of this thing that everything seems so much more terrible is really just the fact that we've got access to a lot more information. That's the first thing. Second thing, you ever heard the saying, if it bleeds, it leads? You ever wonder why the news is so negative? This is why. And if you think about it, unfortunately, it kind of makes sense if you're just looking at it like a business. When you walk by a newsstand and the front page says sunshine and blue skies this weekend, you're all like, oh, good times, and you keep walking. But if that same newspaper says terrible weather ahead, storm of the century coming soon, well, what do? You stop and you pick it up and you buy the newspaper, right? Because we all have an instinct for self-preservation that, quite frankly, the media plays on. And that's why you see so many bad things in the news, even though quite a lot of good things are happening all the time. So when you start getting hung up in the catastrophophobia of things, when you start getting hung up in various prophecies, when you get hung up in Nostradamus, Book of Revelations, all that stuff, which, to tell you the truth, I believe, I'm doing my air quotes if you're not watching the stream, I believe in those things. I believe that John the Baptist saw the future. I believe Nostradamus saw the future and was writing what he saw. The problem is, it is next to impossible to know what it was he saw, okay? That's You got to take it out of social context. Everything John was talking about was wrapped up in the imagery of Rome because all he understood was Romans beating everybody up at the time. The same way Nostradamus' stuff is all wrapped up in a lot of imperial imagery of England and France, right? I mean, if you could see hundreds or thousands of years into the future, how would you explain it? You can't really. So that's why this stuff is all so heavily symbolic, okay? And you can take any of these predictions and apply them to almost any period in time. There'll be wars. Ooh, really? Okay, wow. There'll be earthquakes. Ooh, earthquakes. Oh, How about no man knows the day or the hour of Christ's return? So I don't know why I went into that when we're talking about self-esteem and we're talking about courage. I guess it's related to not being afraid, but maybe somebody out there is really worried about what's about to happen. Maybe somebody out there just heard some sermon on Sunday where their preacher was telling them that that's why Japan had earthquakes, because the end of the world is here. And I'm saying probably not. But as I said in the video, here's the real thing about when you get hung up in catastrophophobia and get hung up about what does this mean and what's this sign and what is this, are the end days upon us. You don't know when your end day is. Okay? Jesus might come back a week from tomorrow. I don't know. If he does, hopefully he's happy to see me because I'll be happy to see him. Fingers crossed. I've said and done some crazy things in my time, but I was just funning. But it's not worth worrying about. Okay? It's not worth worrying about because there's nothing to say that you won't get hit by a bus tomorrow. There's also nothing else to say that you won't live another 150 years if there's big medical breakthroughs. You follow me? So worrying about what's going to happen in the future is pretty much wasted energy. And I'm talking, beyond what you can control, beyond having a plan, beyond having a focus and executing your plan. I'm talking about being worried that an earthquake's going to hit or being worried that a tsunami's going to hit. Like I had a friend of mine who has a child and lives here in Los Angeles like I do. I'm broadcasting out of New York, but I live in Los Angeles through the wonders of modern technology. Amazing what you can do with radio broadcasting these days. And they have a daughter that's about the same age as mine. And when they have the nuclear power plants in Japan are having issues, of course, they're still having issues. And the grandmother wanted to fly my friend and the child out of California, fly them over to Arkansas. And it's like, ooh, there's radiation coming from the nuclear power plant. You shouldn't be there. Ooh. And I'm like, what? Of all the things in this world you can be afraid of, that's what you're worried about. The low-level radiation on the other side of the planet. is leaking. That's what you want everybody to pull up stakes and run for. But here's the thing, when you get into that kind of fear, when you get into that kind of paranoia, where does it actually end? I mean, there's no evidence at all that whatever's happening over there, I mean, they're not even evacuating Japan, right? Or how about Hawaii is a part of the sovereign United States? If the radiation was that big of a deal, we'd kind of be evacuating Hawaii, okay? So why get caught up in the fear of something like that? Do you see how this works? Do you see how it's always possible to be afraid of the fact that the sky is falling? You follow me? Like we've talked about a few times now, how fear only exists in the future. Okay? I mean, if it's not fear of radiation from a Japanese power plant, well, it's a fear of radiation from the sun. That's the thing. When does it stop? When is it safe to come back? I mean, what about the fact that Little Rock, Arkansas, where I'm from, is sitting on a major fault line that hasn't gone yet, and none of that stuff was built to withstand an earthquake. So if an earthquake hit Arkansas, like what hit Japan, Arkansas and Memphis and all that part of the world would kind of crumble into dust. So maybe you shouldn't be in Arkansas, right? Maybe you shouldn't be somewhere with fault lines. Maybe you shouldn't be somewhere with mountains, so there's no mudslides and no trees, so there's no forest fires and no wind, so there's no tornadoes, and no waves, so there's no hurricanes or tsunamis, right? But no snow, so there's no avalanches. You follow me? Where does it end? Where does it end? When you're worried and wound up and stressed about things that haven't even happened and may never happen, right? So what's the point in getting wound up about that? Now, I do have a question for some of you who heard this the first time and heard it when it went live. And this is a little bit of a gut check time. Where are you now relative to when you heard me say those words the first time? How has your life changed? Has it changed? Has it improved? Or are you in that same bad relationship? Are you in that same bad job? Do you still not like who you see in the mirror? Are you still embarrassed about your weight? Are you still embarrassed about your skin? Are you still embarrassed about your body or your car or where you live or your boyfriend or your girlfriend? Do you still have the same fundamental problems that you had when we talked about this the first time? And if so, why? Because here's the thing. What's the one thing all those situations have in common? What's the one thing that all of your dissatisfying relationships have in common? You. Now, I don't mean this to be a downer, quite the opposite, in fact, because what do all your victories have in common also? You. Because this is the thing about responsibility. This is the thing about responsibility, is the fact that you either control everything and you are the captain of your ship, captain of your soul, or you control nothing and you're buffeted along by fate. And that really is the menu. Now, obviously, God has a tiny bit to do with this. Obviously, there is some room for chance. You can do everything right and still have things work out not the way you want, but that's not what I'm saying, because when I start to talk about that, it's like when we talk about the law of attraction, when we start to allow for the fact that, yeah, it's possible that you can do everything right and not get what you want, that it becomes an easy out for people that are trying to let themselves off the hook. Does that make sense? That you're like, oh, well, I focused and I visualized real hard for 2 whole weeks, and Cindy Crawford didn't leave her husband for me, and so obviously this is all crap. No, no, no. That's not how it works. You have to focus. Stay focused constantly, like a magnifying glass, okay? When you use a magnifying glass to focus sunbeams to start a fire, what happens if midway through that you just kind of turn the magnifying glass, or you move it all around so the beam's just kind of going all over the place? It's not going to start the fire. Does that make sense? So, if you've heard me say these words before, and you're probably going to hear me say these words again, I invite you to do something different than you've done last time. I invite you to do something different than you've done every other time. And more importantly, I invite you to actually do something. Because chances are, if you've exerted any effort, and I mean, man, if you've exerted any effort at all, you've seen some improvement in those areas. And I know many people who have. I've seen people make small changes. I've seen people make titanic, gargantuan changes to get out of toxic relationships, start new and better relationships, to get out of toxic work situations and start new and better work situations. Or even if it just means you find new and better ways to frame what it is that you're going through and kind of frame the vicissitudes of life and the trials and tribulations of life, because there's a way to look at everything that's either going to empower you or disempower you. Okay, I can tell you something from my own life, that I had a pretty substantial sum of money that I was anticipating getting last Saturday through a cosmic mix-up that, quite frankly, was partially my fault, and I got to take ownership of that. Instead of getting the money last Saturday, I was getting the money next Saturday. Now, like anybody, when you expect something one day and it comes substantially later, that can be a drag, and that can kind of throw your plans off, right? And it kind of threw a lot of things that I had going smoothly kind of into a big upheaval, right? But the thing is, did I panic? No, right? Did I let it wear me down and really start to give me anxiety? No. And I have to say I'm like everybody else, right? I started thinking, it's like, oh wow, I thought that was coming on Saturday, and if it's coming the next Saturday, well, what does that mean about this? What does that mean about that? How do I have to juggle here? What's gonna go wrong if I don't do that, right? But none of that had happened. You follow me? And I remind myself, the thing is, I use these same tools that I'm sharing with you. I just use them really fast. Use it fast, fast, fast. That the first time I start thinking, well, if I have to wait a week, what if this goes wrong? And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. It hasn't gone wrong. Do what I can. And do you know what happened? Yes, that money is coming late. But another batch of money that was even a larger amount showed up early. And not only did everything work out fine, I'm actually ahead. But there was a couple of days there that I didn't know that, and I could have made myself miserable in those days. Do you understand? Do you understand what I'm saying? But everything worked out fine because I trusted and had faith that everything was going to work out fine. Because you know what? The only way things can work out is fine. What varies, what varies is whether or not we see it as fine. Whether or not we choose to frame it as a disappointment or an issue or a situation. Does that make sense? I know I'm coming at you a little bit hard today, and I can't say I'm sorry because I'm not sorry, but I don't want you to feel bad. I actually want you to feel good. I want you to leave all of this empowered to do something that you've never done before, okay? But for now, I'm actually going to play a little bit of music, okay? To, I can't say to necessarily to, well, I'll let you hear the song and then you decide if it's a pick me up or not. I guess it depends on whether or not you listen to the lyrics. But here is Marvin Gaye with I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Yeah, so it's Marvin Gaye with I Heard It Through the Grapevine. So I'm going to pause this now and we're going to come back here in a little bit with part three.